The subject is how should human beings live in this world? Part 2. In the preceding chapter, it was shown that reactions of actions, karma phala, have to be experienced. No one is spared from experiencing them. The reactions of all one's actions will have to be borne by oneself alone. There are many who, with the intention of escaping this suffering of reaction karma phala, try various methods. To what extent their attempts and methods are based on reasoning and logic, and whether they can succeed in escaping the experience of reactions karma phala, is discussed below. Many believe that by neutralizing the influence of the stars, graha shanti, and by rituals of offering sacrifice in repentance, prayashchit, they will be able to escape the consequences of their actions. This belief is not correct, because according to the rule of Prakriti, every action has to be followed by its reaction. The mind has to regain its normality through reactions. This is the law of Prakriti, and no one can set it aside. There is, however, the possibility of accelerating or slowing the speed of the reactions, which will bring the mind back to normality. For instance, the reactions which would take 1 month to bring the mind back to normality may, with the help of Tantra, be completed in a day or a year by accelerating or slowing the speed of reactions, but it will never be possible to eliminate them altogether. One may borrow 100 rupees on the condition that the same will be returned within a month. It may be possible to persuade the creditor to waive the condition of payment and increase the period to a year or even to 2 years. The period of the return of the money can be extended, but the return of the money cannot be escaped. Similarly, a person having 150 rupees credit in their account with a condition that they will spend all the money in a month at the rate of 5 rupees a day, may spend all the 150 in 1 day, or may follow the original condition and take 1 month to spend the money. The money will only be used by the depositor whether they do it in a day or a month. The mode of experiencing the reaction can be changed with the help of tantric practices, like the 2 examples cited above, but the experience of the reaction of fate cannot be evaded. Karma phala, consequences or reactions of one's actions, will have to be experienced by a person, and at best only the intensity of suffering at a time can be reduced or increased by slowing or accelerating the speed of reactions. It is possible that the condition of returning 100 rupees in 1 installment may be too hard for the debitor, and he or she may have to suffer great mental agony. But if the same amount is returned in several small installments, the debtor may not feel it at all. The period of suffering is thus increased with the help of tantric practices, with the result that one does not feel the intensity of suffering and wrongly concludes that the experiencing of reactions karma phala has been evaded or stopped because of graha shanti, that is, by neutralizing the influence of stars. For example, if on reading the future of a person it is bound that he or she has to bear the mental suffering of fracture of an arm, it may be possible to stop the fracturing of the arm with the help of graha shanti, but the quantum of mental suffering cannot be changed or done away with. The suffering could be spared, could be spread over a longer time due to number of minor incidents. For instance, the person's hand might get scratched, and later on he or she might fall sick, The person would go suffering in installments till the quantum of his or her suffering equaled the mental suffering he or she was destined to get from the fracture of the arm. The revert to our earlier example, it would mean that the debtor of 100 rupees would have to keep on repaying his or her debt in small installments of a rupee or so until they had paid off the full 100. Here the payment of the debt of 100 rupees represents the mental suffering from the fracture of the arm, which was supposed to be completed in one installment, but through flattery and persuasion of the creditor, that is, by neutralizing the influence of the stars, Graha Shanti, it is being paid back in small installments. Hence, as the return of the 100 rupees is not complete, the payment will have to continue. Just as it is possible to increase the period of experiencing the reactions with the help of Graha Shanti, it is also possible to decrease this period. For instance, some persons wear different stones such as blues, sapphires, which change the mode of their experiencing the reactions. It is possible that by this one may get a fortune by winning a prize in a lottery or may get a promotion in one's employment. This makes people believe that all this has happened due to Graha Shanti, but it is actually not so. Fate or the quantum of experiencing the consequences of one's actions can neither be changed nor evaded. It was explained earlier that one's actions that give happiness to others will beget happiness to oneself to the same extent in mental measure. This quantum of experiencing happiness and pleasure cannot be changed. Only the time required for experiencing it can be increased or decreased. Taking again the example of the deposit of 150 rupees, we see that the money intended to be spent in a month at the rate of 5 rupees a day can be spent in one day by shortening the period of expenditure and leaving nothing for the remaining 29 days of the month. The change in fate brought about by Graha Shanti is similar to this. For instance, the 1000 rupees that one gets as a prize in a lottery due to the influence of the blue sapphire is the person's own money scheduled to be received by him or her in small installments over a long period of time. This money is received in one installment, leaving no balance for the rest of the installments, yet getting a huge amount at once make one believe that Graha Shanti or the wearing of a blue sapphire has changed one's fate. In fact, fate or the experiencing of reactions karma can never be changed. It is only the duration of reactions that can be changed. That is why those who carry on intuitional practice, sadhana, with the intention of achieving emancipation experience pleasure and pain, happiness and agony, quickly so that they may complete the experiencing of reactions in as short a period as possible. Those who desire liberation, mukti, want it in this life itself, and so they experience everything quickly according to their potential reaction sanskaras, so that nothing is left for the future life and they can obtain release from the bondage of Prakriti. Some believe that the results gathered due to evil deeds can be compensated or washed off by the good results earned by good deeds. According to them, if the bad and good deeds are the same in number, there should be nothing left as balance to be experienced. This neither happens nor is it possible. It has been seen earlier that all actions, whether good or evil, cause a deformity in the mind. In the process of mind regaining its normal form, the deformity is removed by an equal and opposite reaction. Hence, deformity caused by evil actions cannot be removed by good actions, as they would only make the mind more deformed. There will have to be an independent, equal, and opposite reaction to every action. When every deformity is removed by an independent reaction, one will have to experience the consequences of good and bad actions separately. Hence, the results of good actions cannot help one to evade the suffering of bad results due to bad actions. Evil consequences of evil deeds and good consequences of good deeds will have to be experienced separately. This is the law of Prakriti. Logically, it has been proved that the experiencing of the reaction, karma phal, of an action cannot be evaded. That being so, blaming God, Bhagwan, for the consequences of our actions or praying to be released from bearing the consequences is only foolishness. One who performs actions will have to bear the reactions also. If you plunge your hand in fire, you will surely burn it. To blame good for burning your hand is merely ignorance or stupidity. It is the nature of fire to burn, and whatsoever comes in contact with it will be burnt. Similarly, it is a self-evident law of Prakriti, or her very nature, that all actions will have reactions. God, Bhagwan, is not in the least responsible for it. The performer of the actions is responsible for it. The performer of the actions is responsible for the reactions also. Since God has not performed the actions, he cannot be responsible for the reactions. It is only people who are responsible for actions as well as for bearing the consequences of these actions. Prayer is the act of asking for a favor with earnestness. It also means a solemn petition addressed to the Supreme Being for certain benefits. One prays to God for something which one does not possess or thinks one does not possess. One asks God for these favors with the faith that He alone can bestow everything, and by His mere wish all wants can be satisfied. By prayer or by begging, one wants to awaken his wish so that one may be granted the things one lacks. Does not one's attempt to rouse the wish of God to fulfill these needs upon careful and rational thinking appear to be a reminder to God to give one something of which God has kept one deprived? It would otherwise not be necessary to remind Him in prayer of that thing or to try to arouse His wish to give. For instance, if one is in need of money, one would, with the faith that God alone can give, pray to Him for the favor of giving one money. Does not this request show God's fault in keeping one in want of money when He alone can give it? God alone is blamed for it, and by praying to Him for money, one is precisely pointing out to Him His partiality in not giving one the money one needed. Therefore, prayer or asking for favors from God is only pointing out to the sole giver his mistakes in the distribution of his favors. It only presumes lack of impartiality in him, and that is why he is blamed for making some very rich and others very poor. Praying to God for favors is only to bring to his notice the charge of partiality leveled against him. When prayer leads to such a conclusion, it is only ignorance to ask for favors. One who performs actions will also bear the consequences, and blaming God for it as partiality is not going to save one from bearing the consequences. A hand plunged in fire will surely get burnt. No amount of praying is going to save it. For God's granting such a prayer would mean either removing the burning property of fire or changing the very composition of the hand so that it is not affected by fire and does not get burned. This is not possible. In God's creation there is no flaw, only because all things small or big follow their own nature, dharma. Otherwise there would have been disorder at every step, prayers which only serve as a reminder to God of His partiality cannot induce Him to change the laws of His creation. Anyone who hopes to make God change His laws through prayer only displays utter ignorance. According to the laws of Prakriti, every action has a reaction which has to be experienced by the person who performs the action. This law is unchangeable, and praying to change this law is only wasting one's time. Prayers cannot change fate, and the experiencing of reactions, karma-phala, is inevitable. A stuti is lauding or eulogizing the qualities of God in a song or hymn of praise, and it cannot be given a higher status than flattery. Flattery is usually practiced on one who is capable of granting a favor and from whom one seeks something. Singing the qualities of God is obviously done with the intention of pleasing Him, or else there would be no use in telling God, who is all-knowing, that He is merciful, He is almighty, and He is benevolent. The intention behind eulogizing these qualities is to flatter God so that He may bestow some of His mercy. He, being almighty, may exempt one from the consequences of one's actions by His authority. A stuti or lauding the qualities is hence only flattery behind which is hidden a prayer for seeking favors. Stuti is therefore just ineffective, as prayer and indulging in it is also a waste of time. Prayer and stuti serve no purpose, and indulging in them is only wasting time, since obvious begging and flattery is not likely to achieve anything. Bhakti or devotion, however, is not like this. Let us see what bhakti is. Bhakti is a Sanskrit word derived vaj plus aktin, which means to call with devotion. It is not a stuti or flattery. It is different from prayer also. It is only to call God with devotion. The utility of this calling has to be seen. The unit consciousness which follows the purpose of creation laid down by the qualified supreme entity by making an effort to return to the omnipresent cosmic consciousness, or those who desire emancipation have to take recourse to bhakti. The only path that leads to cosmic consciousness is to devote oneself to Him completely by calling Him. The quality or nature of the human mind is such that it becomes like the idea or entity to which it is devoted, for instance. If one starts thinking oneself to be mad, one actually becomes mad, as one's mind is largely given over to that idea. Similarly, if one is given to believe that one is suffering from consumption, one becomes so concerned with the idea that one actually develops consumption. The human mind is so made that it has the capacity of becoming like the object to which it is attached. The unit consciousness that wants to return to cosmic consciousness quickly has to become devoted to cosmic consciousness, and that this is bhakti. I am that is the idea to which the unit consciousness has to be completely devoted in order to become that one day. Bhakti, devotion or calling cosmic consciousness thus leads one to become like that. Bhakti or devotion is neither prayer nor stuti. Some, however, say that wanting to merge with cosmic consciousness or wanting emancipation is also a favor that one seeks through bhakti, and so it is also a prayer. This is not so, because the very purpose of God in creating humanity is to make the unit consciousness emancipated like Himself and to return it to the supreme rank. This is the wish of God. And everything in this creation is with that purpose and is directed to us, that one who makes an effort through bhakti to achieve the purpose for which one was brought into being, or for fulfilling the wish of God, does not pray for any favor. For even if one does not make an effort and digresses from the path, one will sooner or later be made to follow it again. Bhakti or devotion is therefore neither prayer nor eulogizing God, stuti. These two do not help one to achieve any result and are merely a waste of time. Bhakti is the method by which one can be completely devoted to cosmic consciousness, and that is the only way to achieve the quickest return to the supreme rank. The consequences of action, karma phal, have to be borne. There is no way to escape them. Even prayer and lauding the qualities of God is of no help. What then is the way out? The only way is to give up evil deeds, the consequences of which keep one bound to the influence of Prakriti by taking a lesson from the consequences that one suffers from. For instance, if a hand is plunged in fire, it is bound to get burned. This is bound to happen, and even prayer cannot relieve one of such consequences. The only way to avoid burning is not to plunge one's hand into fire. Similarly, if there are no evil actions, the question of evil consequences does not arise. The rule of Prakriti that one has to bear the consequences of one's actions must also have some purpose behind it for the welfare of humanity. The purpose of the entire creation is to enable every unit to become emancipated. That is the great object of the qualified supreme entity in bringing about the creation, and hence it can only be called the great benefactor. Even though it is emancipated, it came under the influence of Prakriti for the welfare of every unit. Karma phala, or bearing the consequences of one's action, has been made a very strict rule only for the welfare of human beings, as it is by means of this that He, Bhagavan, restrains human beings from evil actions and leads them to emancipation. God, by His punishments, teaches humans not to indulge in evil deeds, but humans, out of their ignorance, only blame Him for inflicting pain and suffering, blaming God for being partial and unkind and for inflicting pain and suffering, or even prayer and flattery for relief from suffering, are not the correct courses to adopt. The wise take the pain and suffering as a lesson through which the great benefactor teaches them to refrain from evil actions and develop in them discrimination. Hence, abstaining from evil action is the action of the wise and the duty of every human being.